Hello world, it's Austin. Let's talk about being transgender and Christian. This week I want to talk about 3 reasons that we as Christians are called to help and support immigrants, and specifically how we can help LGBTQ immigrants. If you watch a lot of these videos, you know that I have a great respect for Geneset Gutierrez, who is an activist working to end the detention of trans immigrants who are undocumented. Well, Geneset works with a great group called Familia, a trans queer liberation movement, and they put out a new fundraiser this week. They've got the t-shirts that Geneset has basically made famous. They say, Mi existir es resistir, which means my existence is resistance, which I've talked about before. And they've got these t-shirts up, and you can get one if you donate $20 to Familia's organization. And it's a great deal, it's a great cause, it's a great shirt. I contacted Geneset on Twitter and asked her if it was okay if people that were non-Latinx and people that were non-trans, if they could wear the shirts too. And she said that was totally fine. She just wants to get more information out there and more awareness around illegal immigrants and detainees that are trans and queer. And so wearing these shirts, and it's a great thing because you can donate to the organization and you can also get out more information to other people. When you wear the shirt and they ask you, like, what does that mean? You have a great way to explain all about trans detainees. I'm going to put a link to their fundraiser down here in the description. But Familia's work and Geneset's work got me thinking again about how we as Christians are called to support and care for immigrants. And I mean care for them in a positive way, like making sure that they have shelter and food and clothing and a place where the kids can go to school and jobs that the adults can go to that treat them well and pay them a decent wage. Instead, what we tend to try to do in this country is send immigrants back to the often war-torn and dangerous places that they came from. Or we use them as something close to slave labor to pick our fruits and vegetables and to clean our hotel rooms. This is not how God wants us to treat people. So here are 3 reasons why Christians are called to care for immigrants. Number 1, because God told us to. Exodus 23:9 says, "Do not oppress a foreigner, for you yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, because you were foreigners in Egypt." God says that because the Israelites, and Christians by theological extension, know how it feels to be immigrants in Egypt, then we shouldn't oppress other immigrants, right? Now, white American Christians do not remember what it's like to be slaves in Egypt. That's a part of our theological history, but it's not something that we remember or have any experience with. Instead, it might be better to think about how the land that we live on now isn't our land. So there's the second reason. All of the land that we live on in the United States is stolen and conquered land. This was the home of hundreds of different indigenous groups before white people got here, before Christianity got here, and even the land that is now reserved for these people is often owned by the US government. The thing is, Christians should know that we don't own the land. Only God owns the land. In Leviticus 25:3, God reminds the Israelites that the land where they live does not belong to them, the land belongs to God. God says, "This land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers." So, since all land belongs to God, and we are essentially foreigners in that land, what gives us the right to tell other foreigners that they can't live here? Third, we have to remember what happened to the community of ancient Israel when they didn't follow God's command to care for the immigrant and the foreigner. After the Israelites wandered around in the wilderness for 40 years, they finally settled in the Promised Land. And eventually, as happens with most conquering groups, they got a little bit complacent about that land and thought that it was theirs and not God's anymore. Many people with power started exploiting those who didn't have as much power. Almost all the prophets in the Hebrew Scriptures, or the Old Testament, tried to remind ancient Israel that they weren't following the rules. They weren't respecting and caring for immigrants and foreigners. They weren't remembering that the land belongs to God, but the people wouldn't listen. In Malachi 3:5, God promises to draw near to the people for judgment, which doesn't sound good. God promises to personally testify against a whole bunch of people, including those who oppress hired workers in their wages, who oppress the widow and the orphan, and against those who thrust aside the alien and do not fear me, says the Lord. And sure enough, shortly after that, the Israelites were themselves conquered and forced off of that land that they thought was theirs. So of all the people in the world, Christians should be the ones that take in immigrants. Christians should be the ones who fight for the rights of foreigners and people that come to a new place, and especially the people that are trying to escape things like famine and poverty and violence. That includes Syrian refugees, it includes refugees and immigrants from Central and South America, and basically anybody else who comes here asking for help. Transgender immigrants especially need our help because if they are caught by our government without the proper paperwork, they can often, and generally are, held in unsafe places and in hostile conditions. That means that these trans detainees aren't just denied the medical care that they need, but they can also face death and rape and gang violence from within the places that they are supposed to be detained and theoretically protected. Groups like Familia are doing the wonderful work of standing up for these immigrants, standing up for the people that are detained, and trying to end that detention system. Besides donating to advocacy organizations like Familia, you can also work with groups like the Not One More campaign, which has stories from immigrants from all over the world that are fighting for their legal right to stay here. And you can read about their stories and then sign their petitions that will help them stay in this country and in a safe place. So you can check out those links through Not One More down in the description. Let's lend our voices and help support and stand with immigrants, because at the end of the day, we're all living on land that isn't ours, and we might as well help each other while we're here, right? Thanks for watching the video this week, everybody. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be making these videos with you and for you. Links, again, to the Familia fundraiser and to the Not One More campaign down in the description. Go check them out. Click the links. Help people out. It feels good. It's good for the world. So if you want to see more videos like this, you can click the subscribe button, and I will see you back here next Wednesday. Peace.